Hello. My name is Maple Delaney, 39 years old, heart surgery survivor, and apparently the kind of daughter who ruins concert nights. I flatlined for 26 seconds while my parents screamed lyrics 2 states away, and when I woke up, their first message wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "Don't forget the mortgage." Now, watch closely. Because this is the moment everything changes. The ceiling light above me flickered slightly, the buzzing of the fluorescent tube barely louder than the pulse monitor at my side. It didn't matter. Everything else had already faded to a blur, except the sound of my breath, shallow and uneven, and the sterile cold of the hospital sheets sticking to the back of my thighs. I blinked slowly. The room swam in and out of clarity. My heart didn't race. It thudded. Like it was warning me, softly, tenderly, that it was failing. I looked at my phone, still on the rolling tray next to the plastic water cup. My hands, pale and tingling, reached out with a hesitation I hadn't known before. I wasn't scared of the surgery. Not exactly. I was scared of going under and waking up to silence again. They hadn't called. Not once. Not when the ambulance took me. Not when the doctor explained the procedure. Not when I cried in the dark after Iris took the kids back to the apartment. I unlocked the phone with trembling fingers. My thumb hovered over the names saved as Mom and Dad. I tapped it. The ring buzzed in my ear like an echo in a cave too large for my voice. 3 rings. Then 4. Finally, click. Crowd noise. Screaming. Music. Not the kind of screaming that comes from grief or fear. No. It was joy. Frenzy. Then her voice, clipped and high and more annoyed than concerned. "Maple? What now? We're finally here. Please don't ruin this." A pause. Then in the background, his voice, tired and muffled. "She always needs something. Let her figure it out." The line went dead. Just like that. My fingers stayed curled around the phone. It didn't fall, but I felt like I had. The silence that replaced the call was louder than their words. They weren't coming. They hadn't planned to. Not even if I died. I stared at the phone screen until it dimmed. In that moment, something inside me grew still. Like a last breath I didn't know I had been holding finally left. They had picked a concert over my life. Taylor Swift. A sea of lights. Screaming fans. That mattered more. To them, I was a responsibility they'd long since resented. I wasn't someone they wanted to help. I was just noise. A nurse entered. Valerie. I barely registered her voice until she called out something to the hallway. Vitals dropping. I need help in here. A surge of hands. Beeping. Cold fingers against my chest. Voices blurring together. The ceiling spun slowly like a carousel, each light a moment I tried to hold on to. But my body gave in. I was slipping. And just before the world tilted too far, a flash, one I hadn't seen coming. I was 17. Standing behind the school auditorium. My makeup smudged from crying. The lead actress hadn't shown, so I filled in. My first real performance. They never came. I'd told them the week before. Left a program on the fridge. Even reminded them that morning. But when the curtain rose they weren't there. I remember scanning the crowd, hoping, praying, only to find rows of strangers clapping for someone who mattered more than I ever had. That memory slammed into me like a second incision. Not across my chest, but somewhere deeper. They'd been absent from every milestone. Every stage. Every hospital bed. Why did I think this time would be different? The hands pressing on my arm now weren't family. They were strangers. Nurses. Professionals. People doing their job. But then one of them stayed. Valerie. She sat beside the bed, calm but steady. I felt the warmth of her presence through the latex gloves and sanitized air. "I'll stay with you," she said softly. "And I'll call someone to help with the kids." I turned my head slowly toward her. Every breath felt like it weighed more than it should. "There's no one coming," I whispered. Her eyes blinked, but she didn't say anything. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder. That small gesture, no fanfare, no drama, broke something open in me. It was more kindness than I'd received from my own mother in months. Maybe years. The gurney rolled into the hallway. The ceiling lights zipped past like stars falling backwards. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just let go. But before the anesthesia took hold, I had one final thought, quiet and certain and sharp as a truth long denied. I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared of dying forgotten. The voices returned before the light did. Distant, like echoes bouncing off a closed church. I wasn't sure where I was yet, only that I wasn't gone. Not completely. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, and there was a tightness across my chest that pulsed in rhythm with the beeping above my head. Then a hand, warm, soft, touched mine. It wasn't the hand I had spent years longing for. It didn't smell like lilac hand cream or carry the rings passed down from my grandmother. This one was steadier. "You're safe now," Valerie whispered. "Your surgery's over." I blinked. The ceiling came into focus, the fluorescent glow less harsh than before. My body ached in places I couldn't name. But the first thing I managed to ask, through cracked lips and a breath barely formed, was, "The kids?" She smiled, tender and worn. "Iris stayed with them. She's still at the apartment. She even brought her own books for bedtime." I nodded. Or maybe I just imagined I did. Either way, something softened inside me. Gently. Quietly. Like a thaw after a brutal winter. She stayed with me for a while, Valerie. She sat beside the bed, reading something from her phone. I think she thought I was asleep. Maybe I was. But her presence made the silence feel less like abandonment and more like permission to rest. It was the first time in years I'd been cared for without being expected to return the favor. I woke again around dawn. Alone this time, though someone had left a pitcher of water and a folded note from Iris on the tray. The handwriting was sharp, like her voice. "Your girls were angels. We made spaghetti. Call when you can. No rush." I read it twice. Slowly. Letting the words absorb deeper than just skin. At home, I had no messages from my parents. No missed calls. No emails asking how I'd pulled through. Nothing. As if I hadn't gone anywhere. As if I hadn't almost died. Later that afternoon, I asked the nurse if I could be discharged early. She hesitated. "You sure you're okay moving around?" "I've been through worse," I said. Which wasn't a lie. They let me leave with strict orders, a plastic bag of medications, and a follow-up date circled in red. The ride home was quiet. I took a rideshare to the old part of town. Not to my apartment, but to the house I used to call home. It looked the same, down to the chipped flower pot on the porch and the uneven welcome mat. The porch swing creaked in the wind. But I didn't knock. I used the spare key still taped under the fake rock by the steps. Inside smelled like lemon polish and rose potpourri, my mother's way of masking anything real. I told myself I was only there for one reason, to grab my old sweaters and maybe my college notebooks. I still had ideas of teaching again. Of feeling like myself. Downstairs was too quiet. No one was home. I walked straight to the basement, where my boxes were supposed to be stacked in the corner. They weren't. Instead, in the far corner near the garbage bins, I saw a black trash bag torn open. Papers scattered, soggy from the damp air. I stepped closer. Carefully. The concrete floor was cold through the soles of my sneakers. A familiar envelope peeked through the plastic. It was the letter from my college dean. The one congratulating me on my graduation, praising my thesis. My name still faintly embossed at the top. Soaked. Ripped. Next to it, my 8th grade journal. The one I used to hide under my bed, filled with sketches of future lesson plans and poems I never dared share. It had my name on the inside flap. But someone had drawn a thick black line through it. I reached down, touching the page. The ink bled into my fingertips. The ache that bloomed in my chest had nothing to do with the incision or the stitches. It was older. This was my life, discarded like leftovers. Thrown out not by strangers, but by the people who were supposed to protect it. They didn't just forget me. They deleted me. I sat on the cold floor for what felt like hours. Letting the chill seep through my spine. Letting the silence fill the spaces they'd erased. No one had told me they'd cleaned the basement. No one had asked what to keep. No one had called to say, this might matter. They just assumed it didn't. I remembered being 10. Sitting on that very porch with a melting birthday cake, candles drooping. Waiting for them to return from Zinnia's ballet recital. They promised they'd come after her performance, I told myself. I'd kept the cake covered, tried to relight the candles when I heard a car pull up hours later. They never got out of the car. They'd gone straight inside. My mother said, "We're tired. Maybe tomorrow." I had thrown the whole cake away. Back then, I thought maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I wasn't graceful or clever or cute like Zinnia. Maybe if I performed harder, got better grades, stayed out of trouble, they'd show up. I spent decades chasing that performance. But this trash bag full of my life, was the final act. Quietly, slowly, I pulled the torn pieces together and placed them back in the bag. Not to keep, but to bury properly. Even memories deserved more than a basement trash heap. I walked out without looking back. No one saw me. No one asked why I came. The only proof I'd ever existed in that house was now rotting at the bottom of a hefty bag. And when I closed the lid of the trash bin behind me, I whispered to no one. Even my memories weren't worth a shelf. The night after I found my life in the trash, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dim light, staring at the stack of unopened mail beside the salt shaker. The air in my apartment still smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender detergent, traces from the hospital. I thought about my heartbeat, stitched and fragile, and the one thing that refused to stop throbbing inside me, the sense that something essential had died in that house long before I nearly did. The phone buzzed. A sharp vibration against the wood startled me. For one hopeful second, I thought it might be Iris checking in, or Valerie sending a goodnight text. It wasn't. The subject line glared at me in all caps, urgent, mortgage. No greeting. No, how are you feeling? Just that headline. My thumb hesitated before opening the message. Inside, my mother had written, "Don't forget the $1,800 this week. We already booked the cruise. The payments due Friday." That was it. No mention of the surgery. No acknowledgement that I was still breathing. Only a reminder that my usefulness was due by the 1st of the month. I leaned back, the email glowing on the screen, and whispered to no one, "My heart isn't even healed yet, and they've already priced it." The words came out half laugh, half tremor. I closed my laptop and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the street was dark except for the faint hum of a neighbor's TV. Somewhere in that silence, a memory surfaced, the winter after James died. The week I first agreed to send them money. It had been 6 months since the funeral. I'd been sitting in this same kitchen, sorting through medical bills, wondering if I could keep the house for the kids. My father had called, his voice heavy with practiced sorrow. "Your mother's anxious about the mortgage. We thought you could help a little until we get back on our feet." I'd said yes without hesitation. Because that's what daughters do when they're raised to measure love by sacrifice. I remember wiring the first $1,800 that same night. By Sunday, my mother was texting photos from Cabo, palm trees, white sand, their smiles glistening in the sunlight. "First vacation in years," she'd captioned. I never asked how they afforded it. I told myself it was coincidence, not betrayal. I wanted to believe that family meant faith. Now, standing at my own kitchen window, I felt the weight of every payment like a chain I'd polished myself. The following morning, Valerie came by with groceries. "You look pale," she said softly. "Did you take your meds?" I did. I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." She unpacked the bag without waiting for me to offer help, chicken broth, crackers, 2 ripe peaches. The kind of care that doesn't announce itself. "I saw the kids this morning," she said. "Iris is a saint. She said they're drawing pictures for you." I nodded, grateful, but my mind wasn't in the room. The phone buzzed again. Valerie noticed my glance. "You should answer." I shook my head. "It's just my mother." She didn't press. Instead, she poured tea into one of the chipped mugs James had loved. "You don't have to talk about it," she said quietly. "But holding it in won't heal anything." When she left, I sat on the couch and scrolled through social media to distract myself. It was a mistake. The first image that filled my feed was a photo of Zinnia, my sister, standing between our parents at the Taylor Swift concert. All 3 of them glowing under the stadium lights, champagne in hand. My father's arm around her shoulder, my mother mid-laugh. The caption read, "Best night ever. Family forever." I stared at it until the edges of the screen blurred. I could almost hear the crowd, the laughter, the music pounding over my absence. "Family forever," I whispered. "Except for the one they left behind." I zoomed in until their faces filled the screen. They looked so alive, so proud, so untouched by consequence. I tried to imagine what they'd told their friends about me. Maybe that I was busy. Maybe that I was fine. Maybe that I didn't ask for help. My chest tightened. Not from the scar, but from something older, something raw. I reached for my phone again, opened my photo gallery, and scrolled to the image Valerie had taken the day after surgery. The incision ran down the center of my chest, still angry and red. Without thinking, I placed it side by side with the concert photo. Glitter beside gauze. Lights beside silence. They chose the show. I chose survival. That realization didn't come with anger, it came with clarity. Cold, clean, absolute. I didn't text them. I didn't post anything. I just saved the comparison in a folder titled Truth. By afternoon, the ache returned. I sat at the kitchen table again, watching dust float in the sunlight, and realized something that made me almost laugh. I had become their bank account, their scapegoat, and their absence, all in one. I thought of my father's voice, always soft when he wanted something. It's just a small favor, Maple. You know how much your mother worries. And my mother, sweet but cutting, you wouldn't let us lose our home, would you? After everything we did for you. Everything. I wanted to ask what everything meant. Was it the birthday they skipped? The graduation they left early for Zinnia's audition? Or the time they called James not ambitious enough while he was dying in the next room? I had kept count. Quietly, softly, the way daughters do when counting doesn't matter. The email notification pinged again, another reminder. I didn't even open it. Instead, I went to the fridge, pulled down the emergency envelope labeled savings, and placed it on the table. It had taken me 2 years to build that fund, dollar by dollar, teaching extra classes online and selling James's old tools. I ran my thumb along the seal. Then I fed the bills into the shredder, one by one. The sound was slow, deliberate, almost soothing. This was my declaration, not revenge, but release. The machine hummed softly, each slip of paper disappearing into ribbons. I survived the surgery, I murmured. Now I'll survive them. And for the first time in months, I felt steady. Quietly. Gently. The morning light slid across the kitchen counter like a quiet confession. I hadn't slept again. I sat where the shredder had hummed hours earlier, the smell of burnt paper still faint in the air. My phone screen glowed in the half-dark, reflecting on the cup of cold coffee beside me. For a moment, I watched my own reflection, tired, pale, eyes rimmed red from something deeper than exhaustion. Then I opened my laptop. The banking portal loaded slowly, as if it already knew what I was about to do. My cursor hovered over the monthly transfer to Vera Joan. $1,800. My parents' allowance. My peace treaty. My heart beat evenly. No tremor. No guilt. Only a strange, slow calm. Click. A small window popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? I stared at it long enough to see my face in the faint reflection on the screen. I wasn't sure of many things lately, but I was sure of this. Yes, I whispered. Then pressed confirm. The line of text vanished. The weight did too. I exhaled through my nose, a breath so long it almost shook me. Guilt isn't love, I murmured. It's just silence disguised as duty. The room felt softer. I almost smiled. Quietly, gently, like the first crack in a frozen lake. I closed the laptop and turned to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was stirring, the postman, a barking dog, the rhythm of lives that moved on without apology. I wondered how many people woke up that morning still trapped in debts that weren't financial. The email notification dinged. My stomach tightened. For a second, I thought it might be from them, another plea dressed as demand. But no, it was an alumni newsletter from Stanford. I clicked it absent-mindedly, expecting the usual updates about fundraisers or retired professors. The headline froze me: Spotlight, Zinnia Calloway, Stanford alum, digital entrepreneur, empowering women in business. I blinked, sure I had misread. Zinnia. My sister. She never attended Stanford. I had. I worked 3 jobs to make it through. I'd eaten instant noodles for years, sold my car to afford tuition. There she was, smiling in the photo, her name bold beneath a quote, Stanford taught me resilience. My chest tightened, not from jealousy, but disbelief so sharp it stole air. I scrolled down. The article went on about her years studying media and entrepreneurship in California, her innovative startup, and how she balanced family and career with grace. Family. I laughed, a brittle sound that startled even me. They hadn't just thrown away my memories, now they'd stolen my story. A flash from another time lit behind my eyes, me in the dorm laundry room, folding James's letters into a shoebox. Working late in the library, the vending machine dinners, the way my hands shook when I printed my thesis. They hadn't come to graduation. They said it was too expensive to fly. Now my sister was the graduate. The success. The daughter worth quoting. I scrolled again. My mother's name appeared in the acknowledgements. I owe everything to my parents for believing in me. My mouth went dry. I clicked my laptop shut so hard it echoed. The sound brought Valerie into the kitchen. She must have heard from the hallway. She had a habit of checking on me before work. She set her purse on the counter. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. I turned the screen toward her. Did I dream my degree? Or did I hallucinate 4 years of debt? She leaned closer, reading quickly. Then she looked up, eyes wide with something between shock and pity. "No, honey. You didn't dream it. But they erased you from the family resume." The words hit harder than she knew. Erased. Not forgotten. Not overlooked. Erased. I sat down again. My legs felt too weak to hold me. Valerie reached for the kettle, poured hot water into 2 mugs, and placed one in front of me. "You need to breathe," she said. I nodded. The steam curled upward, fogging the edge of my vision. "They can rewrite the stories," I whispered, "but they can't rewrite the truth." She didn't argue. She just sat with me, quiet, letting the silence settle the way friends do when words are useless. After she left, I reopened the laptop. The article stared back like an accusation. I didn't delete it. Instead, I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Things I paid for but never received credit." The message went straight to my drafts folder, the same place my old letters to my mother lived. I never intended to send any of them. But this time, I might. By afternoon, the numbness gave way to resolve. I opened a new email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, each word measured like a slow heartbeat. "Hi Mom. I've decided to redirect my financial support toward recovery and childcare. I wish you the best." No apology. No justification. No hint of guilt. I read it twice before pressing send. Watching the little paper airplane icon disappear was almost peaceful. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched across the living room, painting the walls in long stripes. The quiet felt different now, not hollow, but earned. I walked to the cabinet in the hallway where James used to keep our tax papers. Inside, neatly stacked, were the records I'd started saving months ago, receipts, transfers, the co-signed agreements with my parents' names in black ink beside mine. The proof of years spent funding their comforts. I pulled out the folder labeled Financial. It was heavier than I remembered. The paper edges brushed my fingertips like tiny blades. I sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading everything out. Dates. Signatures. Amounts. I hadn't realized how much of my life was documented in these transactions. How much of myself I'd traded for their approval. Among the papers, I found one that made me pause, the tuition payment receipt from Stanford, the one I'd hidden away because it reminded me of the loneliness of that time. I stared at my own name, printed neatly, and felt the faintest smile rise. They could print Zinnia's photo beside the word alum, but they could never change the records. Slowly, gently, I slid everything back into the folder and closed it. The weight didn't crush me this time. It grounded me. I whispered to the quiet room, "You took my name. Now I'll take it back." Outside, the wind brushed softly against the window. For the first time, it didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like the world breathing with me. The next morning, my phone vibrated before sunrise. For a moment, I thought it was Valerie checking on me again. She'd gotten used to sending gentle messages before her shift at the hospital, reminders to eat, to breathe, to rest. But the notification that lit my screen wasn't her name. It was an email subject line that read, "Urgent, Maple's Rebellion." My stomach tightened. The message wasn't sent to me. It was forwarded by my cousin Emily, who'd added only 2 words above it, "You should see this." I hesitated before opening it, already knowing the voice I would hear through the words. My mother's tone was easy to imagine, dramatic, pleading, sanctimonious. The kind she used when she wanted sympathy disguised as truth. "Family," it began, "after all we've done for Maple, she's chosen to abandon us. We're struggling, but she's decided her money is more important than her parents. I can't believe a daughter I raised with faith and sacrifice could be so ungrateful. Pray for us as we deal with this heartbreak." I scrolled down. Paragraphs of embellishments. Entire sentences that turned my life into an accusation. She even mentioned my surgery, once. Not as tragedy, but as a punchline, she's milking her health issues for attention. My throat went dry. The words didn't shock me. They confirmed what I already knew: she couldn't stand the version of me that stopped serving her. Still, seeing it written out, broadcasted to every relative who'd once pinched my cheeks at Thanksgiving, hurt in a way that was painfully ordinary. It was the kind of wound that didn't bleed. It just ached, slowly, quietly. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. Not this time. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and turned on the light. My proof folder was still on the counter from the night before, the documents neatly stacked. Receipts of transfers, bank statements, contracts with my signature beside my father's. I won't argue, I whispered to the empty room. I'll present. I snapped a photo of one page, the recurring transfer agreement I'd signed 5 years ago. The one marked voluntary support, not obligation. Then another, the mortgage cosign form with a forged version of my signature. The same scrawl my father always used when he needed me to look generous. I drafted a new email, not to my mother, not to defend myself, but to my cousin. Thanks for forwarding this, I wrote. Please share the attachments with anyone who might be confused. My hands trembled only once before I hit send. Minutes later, Valerie knocked softly at the door. I brought breakfast, she said. You left your porch light on all night. She set a brown paper bag on the counter and studied my face. You read something, didn't you? I handed her my phone. She scrolled through the email slowly, her jaw tightening. This isn't just cruel, she said. This is defamation. I gave a small, humorless laugh. That's generous. Try normal. She looked up, eyes steady. Maple, this isn't emotional manipulation anymore. This is fraud. They're lying to family about money that doesn't even belong to them. The word landed heavier than I expected. Fraud. I thought of the fake signature on the helic. Of my father's voice the day he called, saying, "We just need your name for the paperwork, sweetheart. Nothing binding." I'd believed him. I always did. Valerie continued, You could press charges, you know. I know, I said quietly. I just wasn't ready to call it that before. She poured us coffee, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, rain tapped the window rhythmically. It sounded almost like applause, steady, deliberate. They used my name like a credit card, I said softly. Maxed it out, then tossed the bill my way. Valerie reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Then stopped paying it. I nodded, slowly. Gently. By noon, my inbox was full. Cousins replying to my mother's email, some shocked, some cautious. A few sympathetic. One, predictably, judgmental. You shouldn't air dirty laundry in public, one uncle wrote. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I hit reply all and typed just one sentence. While I was in emergency heart surgery, my parents attended a concert and used my name to secure a loan. I attached the 2 documents. The voluntary payment agreement. The forged signature. Proof so clear it didn't need commentary. Then I signed off with my full name, no middle initials, no emotion, and hit send. The message whooshed away. For a second, the silence that followed was deafening. Then a flood of notifications began to ping, one after another. I turned the phone face down on the counter and poured myself another cup of coffee. It wasn't victory I felt. It was relief. Later that afternoon, Valerie stopped by again, still in her scrubs. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. They'll spin it however they want, but at least the facts are out there. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. What are you going to do now? The question hung in the air. For the first time in years, I had an answer that didn't involve them. I'm calling a lawyer, I said. She smiled, but her eyes softened. Good. It's time. After she left, I sat on the couch with the folder again. The rain had stopped. Light filtered through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the carpet. I dialed the number Valerie had given me months ago, a financial attorney she trusted. The receptionist's voice was calm and professional. Good afternoon, Larson and Klein Law. How can we help you? My throat felt tight, but I managed the words. Hi. My name is Maple Delaney. I need to report financial misuse by my parents. There was a pause, not of judgment, but of understanding. Of course. Would you like to schedule a consultation? Yes, I said. Soon. When I hung up, I leaned back against the couch cushions. My body trembled, but not from fear. It was the release that comes after holding tension too long. The kind that feels like standing at the edge of a storm and realizing it's finally moving away. For years, I'd been the quiet daughter, the good one, the steady one, the dependable one. The one who fixed, paid, forgave. The one who swallowed everything because that's what family required. But sitting there in my small, sunlit living room, I understood something I'd missed all along. Silence had never protected me. It had only preserved them. I picked up the phone one last time, scrolling through missed calls I hadn't noticed. My mother, 5 times. My father, once. No voicemail. They wanted control, not reconciliation. I deleted every number except Valerie's and Iris's. Then I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. The world outside hummed with late afternoon noise, cars, laughter, a dog barking somewhere down the street. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing apart from it. I whispered into the still air, "Hi. I'm ready to file." The words tasted like truth. Quiet. Steady. Unapologetic. I didn't expect them to show up at my door. Not after the email, not after the evidence, not after years of my silence finally meant something. But there they were, standing on my porch as if the last few months had never happened, too well dressed for an apology, too calm for grief. Vera wore her Sunday sweater, the one she always saved for church or photo ops. My father's hair was slicked back, his tie perfectly knotted. They looked like a couple arriving for a family portrait, not a reckoning. The knock came soft at first. Then again, insistent, polite, practiced. I thought about pretending I wasn't home. Valerie was sitting in my kitchen, stirring sugar into her tea. She gave me that quiet look, the one that said you don't owe them anything, but you also don't have to hide. I opened the door. "Maple," my mother said, voice trembling with the kind of emotion that belonged in a play, not a living room. "We're sorry. We didn't know you felt so forgotten." Forgotten. The word landed between us like an old coin, tarnished from overuse. I didn't step aside. "You didn't know because you never asked." My father shifted his weight, glancing toward Valerie. "Could we come in?" Valerie stayed seated, her presence like a quiet boundary. I folded my arms. "Say what you came to say." My mother sighed, a long-rehearsed exhale. "Maple, we've all said things we didn't mean. Family fights. It's time to stop dragging this out." "I'm not dragging anything," I replied. "I'm just done carrying it." Her lips pinched, but she pressed on. "You've made your point. We just need a little help with the bank this month. They're calling the hellic early. I didn't let her finish. "There it is," I said. "The real reason you're here." My father looked down at the floor, muttering something about timing and interest rates. The word forgiveness never crossed their lips. Only help. "You didn't come for closure," I said. "You came for funding." For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of Valerie's spoon clinking against her mug filled the silence. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," my mother snapped suddenly, her mask slipping. "You've always had such a dramatic streak." I almost laughed. I learned from the best. They left soon after, walking back to their car in matching silence. My mother didn't look back. My father started the engine before she'd closed her door. Valerie stood beside me as their taillights disappeared down the street. "They'll be back," she said softly. "I know," I whispered. "They always come back when they need something." That evening, after Valerie left, I found myself driving toward their house. I told myself it was curiosity, not masochism. I needed to see the place that had shaped so much of who I was, and who I refused to be anymore. The front door was unlocked. It always had been, a false symbol of trust. The smell hit me immediately, lavender cleaner and the faint sweetness of old perfume. The hallway lights were on, illuminating the gallery wall that stretched from the living room to the stairs. It used to hold pictures of all of us, birthdays, graduations, vacations that never quite felt like vacations. But now it was different. Zinnia at her wedding. Zinnia at her company launch. Zinnia in Paris, standing before the Eiffel Tower. My parents beaming beside her. Not a single photo of me. Not even from childhood. One frame caught my eye, Zinnia holding my daughters, smiling wide while my mother stood behind them. I stepped closer. It wasn't just omission anymore, it was replacement. This wasn't a home, I thought. It was a shrine. And I was the ghost they exorcised. I ran my fingers along the edge of one frame, noticing the faint square of lighter paint where another picture once hung. I knew which one. My graduation photo. The one they'd complained was too serious. I remembered the day it was taken, my hair pulled back, my robe wrinkled from the car ride, my smile tight but hopeful. I'd stood alone outside the auditorium because they'd never made it to the ceremony. Now the space where my face had been was filled with Zinnia's designer smile. I stepped back, letting the air settle around me. I should have felt anger. Instead, what I felt was confirmation. This was who they were. Always had been. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the text message made my stomach drop. Mom said you're blowing things out of proportion. She told me it was just a routine checkup. I didn't know it was heart surgery. I swear, Maple. I didn't know. Zinnia. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The urge to defend, to explain, to make her see the truth, it rose like old smoke. But I swallowed it down. I was done explaining. Instead, I typed slowly, each word deliberate. Ask her what she was doing at 7:13 p.m. That's when I flatlined for 26 seconds. I hit send. No reply came. Upstairs, a faint creak broke the silence. I walked down the hall, passing the guest room where the air smelled faintly of dust and old candles. On the dresser sat an unused frame, silver, slightly tarnished. I lifted it, wiping a streak of dust away. It was empty. No photo. Just the placeholder image of smiling strangers that came with the frame. Something inside me loosened. Slowly, gently, I slipped one of my old college photos from my wallet and placed it inside. The picture was small, me standing in front of the campus fountain, sunlight in my hair, the kind of smile that believed effort equaled love. I set it on the mantel downstairs where the family portrait used to hang. No caption. No note. Just my face among the ones that pretended I'd never existed. I stepped back and looked at it one last time. My heart didn't race. My breath stayed steady. They could take down pictures, rewrite stories, kneel when convenient, but they could never undo presence. I turned off the light on my way out. The room fell into shadow, except for the small glint of glass reflecting from the photo frame. Just my presence. Quiet. Undeniable. Enough. The night after I left that photo on the mantel, sleep never came. The air inside my apartment was heavy, not from heat but from the quiet that always follows truth. Every clock tick felt louder than it should, like it was counting down to something I couldn't see. I was washing a cup when the phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten, Zinnia. My thumb hovered above the accept button for too long, my mind whispering don't pick up. But habit is stronger than wisdom. I pressed answer. Her voice came out shaky. I need to send you something. You need to hear it from them, not me. Before I could ask, the line went dead. A message followed seconds later. One audio file. No explanation. I clicked it. The recording started with the sound of a car engine, low hum, rain tapping the windshield. Then my mother's voice, clear, tired, venom wrapped in sugar. Maple's dramatic. Always has been. If we cry and kneel, she'll soften. She always does. My father's voice followed, sharp and practical. We just need her to transfer the money before the bank comes for the house. This is survival, not sentiment. The breath left my body slowly, like air escaping from something punctured. I played it again, needing to be sure. Their tone wasn't panicked or apologetic. It was calculated. They hadn't come to say sorry. They'd come to sell remorse like a product they couldn't afford to refund. I let the phone rest on the counter, the recording still playing faintly. My reflection in the window looked almost unrecognizable, still, upright, calm. My face didn't move. My eyes didn't blur. Inside, something shifted, not breaking but realigning. They didn't come to mourn. They came to manipulate. The thought didn't ache, it clarified. I opened the voice app again, dragged the slider to trim silence, added subtitles through a simple editing program. It wasn't rage that guided my hands, it was precision. I adjusted the file name, Confession. For years I'd been told I was too emotional, too reactive, too easily hurt. But now my silence was sharper than their words had ever been. When I finished, I uploaded the clip into the family group chat. The one filled with pastel holiday greetings and pictures of Zinnia's baby showers. No greeting, no explanation, just one sentence. This is what I was worth. To the people who raised me. Then I hit send and turned off the sound. Within minutes, the phone began to vibrate. I didn't look right away. I stood by the sink, washed the same cup again, drying it slowly, gently, until my heartbeat matched the rhythm of the towel strokes. When I finally picked up the phone, there were dozens of notifications. One aunt demanded I delete the clip immediately. You don't air family business like that. Another texted quietly, I'm sorry you had to hear that, Maple. One cousin offered to bring the kids toys if you need a break. And then came my mother's message, short and perfectly phrased for sympathy. I can't believe you would humiliate us like this. I stared at the words until they blurred. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then I switched to voice memo. My tone was even, my breath steady. I didn't humiliate you, I said softly. I revealed you. There's a difference. I pressed send and put the phone face down. An hour passed. Maybe more. I sat by the window, watching rain begin to fall outside. The street lamps glowed against it, turning every drop into gold. The city felt strangely alive, like it was exhaling on my behalf. When Valerie arrived, she didn't knock. She'd started letting herself in weeks ago. She stood in the doorway with a bottle of wine and that half-smile of hers. I saw the family thread, she said. You made quite the impression. Good or bad? I asked. Necessary. She poured 2 glasses and handed me one. To freedom? I shook my head slightly. To the end of playing daughter. We clinked glasses. The sound was delicate, final. Valerie studied me for a moment. How do you feel? Strangely calm, I said. Like the ground under me finally stopped shifting. She nodded. Truth has a way of doing that. I thought of the clip, still circulating, still echoing in phones across our family tree. I imagined my parents listening to their own words, realizing too late that control and love aren't synonyms. For a fleeting second, I felt pity. Not for what they'd done, but for the emptiness that must follow when a lie runs out of audience. Valerie leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine. You think they'll respond? Maybe, I said. But they'll respond to the fallout, not the truth. We sat in silence for a long while. The rain softened. The wine bottle emptied. The hum of the refrigerator filled the pauses where apologies used to live. At some point, I opened my phone again. Messages kept coming, smaller now, quiet condolences, disbelief, a few offers to mediate. The kind of noise people make when faced with a family imploding publicly. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I went to my photo gallery and deleted every picture that still included my parents. The birthdays, the forced smiles, the Christmas mornings where I'd stood at the edge of every frame. My finger hesitated only once, on a photo of my father teaching my daughter to fish. He looked happy there, genuinely happy. But even that moment, I realized, had been borrowed. He'd asked me for the camera afterward, insisting on approving what was posted. I deleted it too. Clean slate, I whispered. Valerie smiled softly. You're not erasing them, she said. You're reclaiming yourself. Maybe she was right. It felt less like deletion, more like oxygen returning. By the time she left, the rain had stopped completely. I stood by the door, holding the empty wine glass, staring at my reflection in the window again. For years, I'd believed that silence meant peace. But tonight, silence felt like something else entirely, authority. The kind that didn't need an audience, only truth. I turned off the lights, walked into the living room, and sat down with my laptop. I opened a new folder and titled it, Freedom Files. Inside, I dragged the confession audio, the bank documents, the forged signature scans. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about evidence. I saved the folder to an external drive and slid it into a drawer. The storm outside had left the air clean, washed. My body felt the same, light but tired. I poured myself a glass of water, raised it like a toast to the empty room, and whispered again, softly, almost smiling, to the end of playing daughter. The air felt different in the morning. Not cleaner, not lighter, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask questions, just listens. I moved quietly through the apartment, picking up the mug I'd left on the side table, folding the blanket I'd barely used. My daughter was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her favorite storybook in hand. "Read it with me?" she asked, holding the book out like it was something sacred. I sat beside her, careful not to lean too hard on my left side. The scar beneath my shirt still ached in the mornings, softly, like it knew not to scream anymore. She nestled into my arm as I flipped open the book. Halfway through the story, she looked up at me, her voice quiet and unblinking. "Why didn't Grandma come when you were sick?" The words didn't cut, they landed. Heavy, honest, like only a child's could be. I didn't answer right away. My throat went dry. I turned the page and looked at the picture, pretending to study it. I had answers for everyone else. For lawyers. For friends. Even for Valerie. But not for a 5-year-old. My silence must have made her nervous. She pressed in closer. "Was she mad at you?" I kissed her forehead. "No, baby," I whispered. "She just forgot how to be a mom." She nodded, too wise for her age, and leaned into me again. Later that day, I walked out to the mailbox. The sun was high but soft, and the gravel under my shoes crunched with every step. I waved to my neighbor, Mrs. Carmichael, who had lived on the corner since we moved in. She crossed the street, mail clutched in her hand, her eyes full of something I couldn't name until she got close. "Maple," she said, pausing before adding, "I heard from Vera the other day." Of course she had. My mother was always careful to curate the right version of the truth for the right audience. "She told me you'd gone out of town," Mrs. Carmichael continued. "Said no one in the family was sick. Just a short trip to recover from burnout." I said nothing. She blinked. "But weren't you in the hospital?" I nodded. "Heart surgery." She gasped. I had no idea. "That's how they wanted it," I said, gently. "They erased me in real time." Mrs. Carmichael touched my arm. "I'm sorry. Truly. If I'd known." I smiled. "You know now." Back inside, I placed the mail on the counter and stood in the doorway of the living room. The framed photo I'd left at my parents' house had stayed in my mind since I placed it. Not because I thought they'd keep it, but because it was the first time I'd inserted myself into their story without asking permission. That afternoon, Valerie stopped by with a casserole wrapped in a dish towel and a look that told me she didn't just come for the food. "I thought you could use dinner," she said, setting it down. I nodded. "Thank you." She reached into her bag and handed me a manila envelope. Inside were some bills, a few mailers, and a picture, one I hadn't seen in years. It was the last printed photo I had with my parents. Thanksgiving, maybe 10 years ago. I looked young. Hopeful. Before the payments, before the silence hardened into survival. Valerie watched as I stared at the photo. She didn't ask what I planned to do. I walked over to the sink, pulled out a lighter from the drawer, and took the photo out of its frame. Outside, I lit the edge. The paper curled, blackened, vanished into ash. Valerie didn't speak. But when I looked at her, her eyes were glassy. "You deserved so much more than what they gave you," she whispered. I nodded. I didn't cry. I just watched the last image of that version of me dissolve. Slowly. Quietly. That evening, I opened my laptop and found the 2 pictures I'd saved weeks ago. One was from the hospital, my scar, raw and clean, running down the middle of my chest. The other, a screenshot of my family at the Taylor Swift concert, champagne in hand, glitter everywhere. I posted them side by side on my private feed with one sentence. I was in surgery. They were singing. Now you know why I stopped calling them family. I didn't add hashtags. No calls for sympathy. Just the truth. Then I turned off notifications. The next morning, I dressed slowly, carefully. I chose a sleeveless blouse, not because of the weather, but because I didn't want to hide the scar anymore. At school, the halls buzzed with the same low rhythm, lockers slamming, kids laughing, sneakers on tile. I walked to my classroom, holding my coffee with both hands. As I stepped inside, one of my students looked up from her desk, her eyes drifting to my scar. "That looks brave," she said. I smiled, not at her, but at the window beside me, where my reflection stood tall, steady, and finally complete. The manila envelope came without warning. No return address. Just my name in unfamiliar handwriting, slanted left and slightly shaky, like someone wrote it with fingers that didn't want to finish the task. I stood in the kitchen holding it for a moment before opening it. Something about the weight told me it wouldn't contain money or threats. Inside was a single page. Lined notebook paper. Handwritten in black ink. We've sold the house. I won't bother you again. No greeting. No name. No signature. It wasn't an apology. It was a white flag without the decency of surrender. I stared at the words until the meaning softened. Then I walked to the fridge and taped the letter next to my daughter's drawing of a house with 4 stick figures, 3 holding hands, 1 with a heart above her head. I didn't tape it there to remember Vera. I taped it there to remember the cost. That evening, Zinnia messaged me. They moved into an apartment near the highway, she wrote. Mom's not doing well. She's been quiet. She asked if you'd visit. I read it twice, the guilt-coated plea disguised as sisterly concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the banking app on my phone and created a new account. I named it after my daughter and deposited $500. In the memo line, I typed, "Start fresh. On your own terms." She wouldn't inherit their patterns. Not if I could help it. 2 weeks later, Valerie and Iris helped me plan a potluck. Nothing fancy, just casseroles, lemonade, and the kind of laughter that didn't need permission. The backyard buzzed with neighbors and folding chairs. Valerie brought peach cobbler. Iris, potato salad. I brought paper plates and the decision not to overthink anything. Midway through the afternoon, my daughter ran into the yard carrying a tray of cupcakes. Each had a single candle, lit and flickering in the breeze. "For Mom's New Life Day," she shouted. Everyone clapped. I didn't cry. I just let the warmth settle in slowly, like morning light on a bed that's finally yours alone. After the guests left and the chairs were folded, Valerie sat with me on the porch. "You're different," she said. I nodded. "So is my peace." She smiled. "That's the expensive kind." We sat in silence until the stars came out. A few days later, I received a call from the local support group. They were hosting a panel on recovery, emotional, financial, familial. The organizer asked if I'd be willing to speak. The theme was, surviving without apologies. I said yes. When I arrived, I wore a soft green dress, nothing dramatic, just something that felt like breath. My scar was visible. My voice was steady. I stood at the podium and looked out over the room filled with strangers holding stories too heavy to say aloud. "We don't get to choose our families," I began. "But we do get to choose our legacies." No one clapped. Not right away. And I didn't need them to. After the talk, a woman approached me in tears. She said, "I didn't know I was allowed to walk away." I held her hand. "You are." Quietly. Slowly. "In your own time." The next morning, I drove out to the cemetery. I hadn't visited James's grave in nearly a year. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't know what to say that wasn't soaked in grief. Now I did. I stood there holding a single maple leaf, turning it gently in my fingers. The wind moved around me but didn't push. It just passed by, soft and steady. I kept trying to make them love me, I whispered. "But you always did. That's what saved me." I placed the leaf on the stone and sat for a while. I didn't pray. I just breathed. Before I left, I reached for my daughter's hand. She had brought her sketchbook. She asked if she could draw Daddy's stone. I said yes. We walked back to the car without speaking. But something in the air between us felt complete. They lost a daughter. I found a life. Sometimes, peace doesn't come wrapped in apologies, it comes from knowing when to stop asking for them. Maybe that's the real legacy we get to choose, not the family we were born into, but the boundaries we build to protect what we become. Have you ever walked away from a family that made you feel invisible? Tell me in the comments, because stories like yours matter too. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more true stories about healing, truth, and the quiet power of walking away.